Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is 7 sketchy things about Gemini. I've been having a lot of fun doing these thus far. And just to kind of like clarify what this is all about, these are the shadow elements or the shadow side of Gemini. It is not meant to imply that every Gemini is doing these things or they're acting in this manner. And the other thing too to note is that the word sketchy, which has always meant to me shady, underhanded, is really, I'm using that as a broad term to mean anything that is of the shadow element of this particular sign. And it doesn't have to be the sun sign either. It can be the moon in Gemini, Gemini rising, Mars in Gemini, and Venus in Gemini. So number one is you can't pin them down. They have commitment issues. And you can even get somebody who is a sun in Cancer and they might have Venus in Gemini. And they kind of hesitate when it comes to actually taking that next step in the relationship. So, for instance, I'm mentioning Cancer specifically because Cancer people tend to be very traditional and they want to get married and start families and things like that. Gemini isn't like that, not typically. Doesn't mean they don't do it, but it's not the first thing that they think about. When they're interacting with somebody romantically, they're happy just to be in that situation, but they don't necessarily think, oh, wow, we should tie the knot or we should have children. So because Venus is a personal planet, and especially with Venus is so close to the sun, it can only be, I think it's like 45 degrees away from the sun. So you cannot have the sun in Cancer and have a Venus in Sagittarius, for instance. So something like that may create this lack of commitment with Gemini. And about not being able to pin them down, this is because if you think of the ruler of Gemini, it's Mercury. Mercury, if you think of the actual mercury that is in a thermometer, it's also called quicksilver. And you can't, you try to grab it, it's actually supposed to be toxic, but I mean, it kind of just gets out, goes away from you. And that's what a Gemini person is like. And you try to, it's ironic because they're known for communication, and yet you might try to text them and you don't hear back from them. And they manage to keep themselves protected from anyone knowing their whereabouts, perhaps. Again, we're talking about the shadow side. What to do if you are dating somebody like this? Well, again, you have to decide whether you want to chase somebody forever. My feeling is that if somebody is hesitant to do something, then you have your answer. And you should never try to coerce anybody or guilt somebody into doing what you want them to do. If you're a Gemini who is afraid of commitment, it might be that you have not met the right person yet. It probably is that. And also, it's possible that you are not, you haven't dated long enough, not just that person, but dated in general. Maybe it takes you longer to settle down. So don't compare yourself to other people. If you're in your late 20s and everyone your age is like getting married, you may not feel like settling down until you're 35 or even 40. And that's fine. Everybody's an individual. Number 2, con artist, grifter, used car salesman. And, that's harsh, obviously, but Gemini has the gift of gab. And so when you use that wonderful skill in a nefarious way, this is what can result, is somebody who can get by in life without really accomplishing, it's not a sense of accomplishment, but a sense of putting much effort into anything. And they can get people to give away the store. As a matter of fact, sometimes I read news articles about someone they've arrested who is like a master con artist. And it's almost like it is fascinating. And I'm always wondering, are they a Gemini? Or that's something that I would wonder, because they manage to talk their way into all of these situations that make people trust them. And meanwhile, they're totally being dishonest while they're doing it. And yet people do not suspect it because they're so smooth. And the other thing that I think goes along with this is being able to manipulate. And this is the person who is adept at reading other people and knowing what makes them tick, and then tailoring what they say because, to say what the other person wants to hear. And obviously that is deceptive, but that's like, duh. I mean, all these things that I'm talking about are deceptive. The point is that this type of Gemini person is able to be very successful doing it. And if they're the kind of person who wants to get by in life without having to lift a finger, they may use these talents that they have in a way that is destructive. But they still have this. And they may have some charisma. They can be very charming, and they're usually Geminis are naturally intelligent, whether they dropped out of high school or not, doesn't matter. They just are naturally, they may be self-taught, they may be well-read, and they can get by and really give a nice impression until you figure out what they're really all about. If you find yourself in the clutches of a con artist, you have to outsmart this person. And obviously, you can just walk away from a person like that because they're not being genuine. So you don't want to be with somebody. If you catch somebody in a lie or a discrepancy about what they've said about their past, for instance, don't say, but they're a lot of fun to be around and all those things. Realize that this is a serious ethical breach, and it indicates other things that are probably going to be bad within that situation. If you're a Gemini who has done this, obviously you have to repent and change your ways and really examine what is the payoff. There's something that you're getting out of this. I don't know what it is, but maybe it's taking the easy way out. And because grifters, con artists, they try to get by on their charm, and they're not really willing to exert effort to make a way for themselves in the world. They're actually living off of other people. And the other thing too about this is you have to make sure, find your passion, Gemini. It'll usually be something that you can use your natural intelligence to make your dreams come true. But don't go through life being deceptive, because it's not good for you and it's not good for other people. Number 3, they change their mind like they changed their drawers. And also, I would add with that, I'll do number 4, because number 4 is imbalanced mood and neurotic, and I'll talk about that because I actually think that Gemini people can have multiple personalities sometimes, the lower expression. But about changing the mind, there can be also indecisiveness. And I think of the 2 of Swords in the tarot. I don't know if it connects with Gemini. It's definitely air sign energy, but it's natural for all of us to have a change of heart. But Gemini takes this, the shadow side of Gemini takes this and makes it an art form where they are constantly changing their opinion. And it gets unnerving if you're in a relationship with this person at a pretty intimate level and you know how they feel about certain things, and all of a sudden they change on you. You're like, who is this person? And so Gemini, in terms of this, it's great to be flexible and it's great to see other points of view, but it's important to have a core sense of yourself, and from that springs your opinions. And it's not that those opinions are rigid. I mean, they're capable of being influenced, but not to the point where you're just like twisting in the wind all the time. Number 4, imbalanced mood, neurotic. All air signs can get goofy, and this is because sometimes they're living in their minds. They're not really grounded. And, you hear the term airhead, and people think airheads are like ditzes, they're spaced, they're, maybe even a little bit dumb. And that's certainly not true of air signs. They're not dumb. They're naturally intelligent, no matter how much schooling they've had. But they do tend to be abstract and out of touch with their feelings. This is like the pure interpretation of air. Obviously, we're a mixture of different things, and some people that are air signs may have a lot of water, like Cancer, or if they're by Libra, it could be Scorpio. So we're not saying that this is going to be true across the board, but we're talking about the shadow side. And they tend to think too much and analyze their feelings rather than actually experience them on a visceral level. And when you analyze something, you're separate from it. And sometimes it's good to analyze your feelings because you can realize that what you thought was one emotion was really another. Like maybe you thought you were angry at somebody, but you're really afraid based upon what you felt triggered by. So I'm not saying that it's not good to analyze your feelings, but you can talk too much about your feelings and be out of touch with them. And this tends to be what is true for Gemini. And this can affect the lower expression of Gemini in so many different ways, especially in the realm of relationships with others, where they have trouble connecting and committing, and within themselves having imbalances in mood because they're also changing their opinion. So they can feel like this constant whirlwind where they're not stable in any of these things. And that can get to anybody. So basically, Gemini, meditation, because meditation is an anchor. It anchors your mind. It anchors your racing thoughts and keeps you understanding that the things that are true in life are, there's like the body is temporary and the soul is eternal. So things of the spirit will always trump things of the flesh, or even things of the mind, that there's something beyond the mind. Don't worship the mind and think, wow, that's the ultimate is, the fact that I read this book about something. No, the be still and know, that's what meditation really is. Get in touch with your higher self. Books are nice, but they're mentally stimulating. They're not necessarily going to help you to, reach a sense of peace. And that's what the imbalance is all about. Equanimity, they call it. And being neurotic is like an extension of that, where there's just too much of the mind chatter that is affecting the person and making them goofy, making them, be too, what's the word, abstract, or you can tell sometimes when somebody's an air sign because they really have they use a lot of labels for things, whether it's about themselves or other people. And, especially talking about, I'm a bipolar, type 1, or about their own emotions, but that's not really an emotion as being bipolar. That's a diagnosis. So, what are the things that happen when you're feeling an imbalance emotionally, rather than give me a label that's academic? If you're in a relationship with somebody like this, get them to really talk about their feelings. Don't allow them to over intellectualize. 5, two-faced gossip, spills the beans, 2, diarrhea of the mouth. That's definitely Gemini. Even the ones that are, more advanced, they tend to be very wordy and talk your head off and everything like that. Again, that's the mind racing. That's the need for that stimulation, but not being discerning in their speech, and just kind of like running their mouths. And the gossip and the two-faced aspect is really, I think, a big one and very destructive. A lot of it is just to kind of entertain themselves and kind of like feel a sense of belonging when they're gossiping about somebody. And I'm going to include number 6, where I said shallow as because the shallowness, the superficiality, that's what gossip is all about. Not talking about deep things, but talking about silly trivia or, emotional, drama that other people are involved in, gossiping about that as a way to entertain yourself and others. Okay. So with the gossip, with being two-faced, I think this is a Gemini trait that really sucks for those who are doing that, because they can really give you this, song and dance about how they are, and then behind your back, they're just dissing you. And that is that's really superficial. It's immature, and it's mischief making. And I think that's another thing. Gemini trolling people and, kind of verbally getting into trouble. And I'm going to even include number 7, snarky, uses words as weapons. It is natural for Gemini people to be snarky, but especially the lower expression, where it's not, the whole point is being clever. That's their whole purpose. And if it means that they say something that's not nice, that's mean about somebody, and then they play it off as a joke, whatever, because they can get a laugh, they can get attention, and that's good enough for them. And the other thing about being sarcastic is sometimes people don't know that you are being sarcastic, and they take you seriously, and that creates its own set of problems. It doesn't mean that we can't joke around from time to time, and even maybe mild sarcasm, but when it gets kind of rough, mean, and the Gemini person doesn't care because they're just about the laughs, they're just about the attention, then it's problematic. And if you're with somebody like that who does that to you, point it out to them and say that you don't appreciate it. If they care about you, they're not going to do it. If they don't really care, they care more about themselves, then they probably will continue to say things that they shouldn't say. So all of these things are, and this is about Gemini too, really learn how to find meaning in life, because as I said, I think a lot of this is mischief that the Gemini person gets into because they're very active mentally and verbally. And, they say an idle hands is the devil's playground. Now, the other thing about that is idle idle mind or idle mouth is the devil's playground too. Is it the playground? I'm not sure. But it's like, in other words, you have to have awareness and cultivate awareness and not be careless with words, not be careless with the way that you interact with others verbally, because that can lead to being too talkative and, really irritating people with compulsive talking, but also being a gossip and being two-faced and being shallow and not diving deep enough yourself. So anyway, I hope that this provided some kind of, entertainment, but also information for some of you out there. And if you like this kind of analysis, check out my readings, my astrological readings. This is just the way that I approach things. I mean, I talk about transits too, which are, kind of more on the predictive end, but this is kind of my favorite thing, is to talk about personality traits, because I really feel it's very self-empowering, that knowledge is power. And if you can see how you operate, and some of these things are kind of unconscious patterns, it's really a lot easier to make those changes that you need to make, and not just like wait for the outside world to provide you with this or that, but really take inspired action on your own. Okay, take care. Bye.